Good morning and welcome. My name is Maria Clayton and I am the Communication Director for the California Department of Education. I want to welcome you here to this virtual press conference on improving Black student achievement and the task force that is being launched toward this effort. This is an initiative close to the state superintendent's heart, and we are joined today by some renowned scholars and leaders on this issue. After we have the opportunity to hear remarks today, we will be turning to a second part of our agenda where we'll be taking some live Q&A. I will be asking our media partners to use the raised hand function, and I will be turning on the live mic so that folks can go ahead and ask their questions. I'll get into that more as we get to that part of the agenda. But with that very brief introduction, I want to hand it over to the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Good day to you all. Thank you for being with us and for helping to carry the message about the launch of our new state task force on supporting Black student achievement. As you know, I am and we are committed to the success of all 6 million of our students. But we feel that we are in a moment where we need to be explicit in calling out the opportunity to support Black student achievement. If you look at the achievement gap, you will see that for most groups of students of color, there has been a narrowing of that gap between students of color and white students, even in cases where it's mild or modest. Unfortunately, in many cases, that gap has not narrowed as it relates to comparisons of Black students and their white peers. Our students can be successful. We know that they can be successful, but students have experienced barriers that have in many ways impeded much of their success. We know that those barriers are many: poverty, racism, many historical issues, socioeconomic challenges. And we know that some of those gaps have been exacerbated and grown during the pandemic. For those reasons, I've named a task force on improving Black student performance, on supporting Black student achievement, so that we can be explicit, even while we're working on efforts to support all of our students, to be explicit in what we must do to continue to support Black students in our state. You'll hear today from some incredible leaders and partners, researchers and legislators, and many others who care deeply about these issues, who've been working on these issues for quite some time. The task force is merely a way of getting to a place of recommendations that for how to reach the goal of improving Black student achievement. The task force, which is now in formation, as it gets underway and new members are added, the task force will make recommendations that will ultimately fold up into legislation that will give us an opportunity to have ways to fill gaps that we might need to fill to help us move to success. This is not a new question. This is a conversation that we've had in every state in this nation for quite some time. But yet this gap has persisted. And this is our opportunity to be intentional and to do important work to do it. We've seen from the achievement gap, we've seen disproportionality in suspensions. We've seen disproportionality in chronic absenteeism rates, in graduation rates. And these are not just trends of disproportionality in schools. These trends of disproportionality, including young people and their being pushed into the criminal justice system, these trends of disproportionality mirror the same disproportionality that African Americans and other groups experience in the larger society. Health disparities, disparities around poverty. We have more than 24 schools that have some of the highest rates of racial segregation and poverty in our state. And so these experiences call out for us to make change. We have to overcome environmental injustices, we have to overcome health disparities, we have to overcome racism and all of these barriers that have impacted our students. We have opportunities to look at many things through the lens of the task force, including how we get more teachers of color into our programs, how we help to reduce chronic absenteeism, how we address segregated school districts, and how we look for more opportunities like restorative justice that can help us to reduce suspensions and expulsions. We also have the opportunity to link our efforts of this task force with some of the historic investments that have been made in the California state budget. Thank you, Senator Kamlager, and to your colleagues and to the governor for these investments. Just to name a few, because now is the moment. When you think about these investments, now is the moment for us to do this work to close learning gaps for Black students. We have more than $1 billion available for diversifying the teacher workforce. Why is that important? Because data shows us that when a school has even just one African-American teacher, African-American students do better. As a matter of fact, all students do better. And so we believe that this will be a strategy upon which a rising tide will lift all boats. But we will be intentional and specific in calling out the needs of diversifying the teacher workforce. There's $3 billion in this budget for community schools, for great wraparound supports that can be transformative in how they change school culture and give us a bridge for addressing racial justice and social justice, and $10 million that we will also be implementing for anti-racism grants for our schools to address the historic impacts of race and racism on many students in our state. We might move to supporting Freedom Schools, an Afrocentric literacy program that in many cases has been proven to increase grade level reading by a whole grade in as little as 6 weeks. And of course, this strategy will be very much interlinked with our task force on increasing reading levels so that our students learn to read by 3rd grade by 2026. Again, we know reading is a gateway skill, and that when children learn to read, they can read to learn anything. And so we will continue this important work. And so that's the high level overview. Again, the task force is in formation. We've named some chairs who you'll hear from today, some of the co-chairs. The task force will continue to build out this membership, and we'll make announcements in the days and weeks to come about the task force membership and its duration. But we're calling out today, day one, the importance of doing our work to improve Black student achievement. Now an opportunity to hear from some of our key partners and co-chairs. It's an honor to introduce Senator Kamlager, who represents the 30th Senate District in Los Angeles. Senator Kamlager has introduced landmark legislation to make criminal justice reform, to support healthcare, environmental justice, and Senator Kamlager has a deep interest in what we do to support our students. It's an honor to turn the mic over to you, Senator Kamlager.
Thank you, Superintendent Tony Thurmond. Hello to everyone. And just thank you, Tony, for inviting me here to share in this historic moment with you and with everyone here today. The superintendent knows that I have been stalking him for months on text, talking about Black students, our young folks that are in the system, and ways that we can work together to do better for them. So I am so honored to be here for the announcement of the Black Student Achievement Task Force, alongside some very preeminent chairs and co-chairs, and of course, the Superintendent Tony Thurmond. You know, it is no surprise, as he mentioned, that our achievement gap remains unclosed. And like so many other instances of inequity, it's only been exacerbated by the pandemic. We also know that student success is not only predicated on what happens within a classroom environment, but on the multitude of environmental factors impacting our students. So that's why the superintendent has called upon the best of the best, in my estimation, in the state of California to help lead this task force. These chairs are unafraid to lean into uncomfortable discussions about race and about equity. And so I'm really excited for the opportunity for us to be uncomfortable for a while as we tackle some hard truths about what we are doing and what we're not doing. The reality is none of this is a zero-sum game. The reality is everything is interconnected. It's as much about how full your tummy is when you get to school, what you had to deal with to get to school, what happened the night before, if you were able to get some sleep, where you were sleeping, what was going on in your household, what the books look like, how the teacher sees you, how you're being taught, if any of your unique needs are being met. What happens after school? Are you prepared to go home? Are you able to be in a space where you can learn? Now, none of this is about creating recommendations that create a fantastical Pollyanna experience, but it certainly is about digging into the gross disparities and inequities that are disproportionately impacting Black students. And ultimately, this is about, do we, and if we do, how do we value Black students, Black children, Black bodies, and Black futures? Ultimately, this is about why our expectations, why our investments, and why our strategies for punishment and incentive are so incredibly different and disparate between Black students and other students. And those are real. I am incredibly honored to be part of this and to know that this is happening as a member of the legislature, as the vice chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus that has two pillars. One is to support Black businesses, and the other is to increase the graduation rates of Black students. But mostly because I am the mother of school-age Black children who have been struggling to be seen and to be valued in their school systems. I have one personal story that I will share, but ultimately it was about my Black child being only one of two Black children in a classroom and having the teacher say that she was afraid of Black people and had in fact never seen one. And then all of a sudden decided that the Black people she liked the best had the darkest skin. And it just gave me pause once again about how we are valuing and investing in the education of seeing and teaching and preparing Black students for a future. And so we just have to do better, which is why the superintendent has put together this task force and has said that this is a commitment for him for 2022, and why he knows that he has the full and complete support of the California Legislative Black Caucus, because the quality of someone's education should have nothing to do with where they live or the color of their skin. So I look forward to finding out what the recommendations are that come from this amazing task force. And I am hopeful that I actually will be able to author some of the recommendations that reveal themselves to be policy opportunities for us. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here to stand with you today, Superintendent Tony Thurmond.
Thank you, Senator Kamlager. You've proven to be an incredible partner as a legislator, leading groundbreaking legislation that it touches on all the things that we're talking about today. An incredible leader in our California Legislative Black Caucus. And I think you gave a very powerful testimonial about why this work is important as a parent. Many of us are parents. I also am a parent of two young daughters, and we all have stories of heartbreak that should not exist in this day and age. And so thank you for that. And, you know, our department has been leading an initiative called Education to End Hate. That is our way of helping educators to address implicit bias. And our anti-racism grants will help schools deal with explicit bias and racism where it exists. We're excited to work with you, Senator Kamlager. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Pedro Noguera, who needs no introduction. He's one of the leading voices on all aspects of education. As a researcher, as a leader, he's been in partnership with us throughout the pandemic, talking with school districts about how to address trauma, about how to address learning loss and learning gaps, about how to support our students and keeping them safe. And as you will hear, he has led incredible research on all kinds of aspects and components of student achievement, and looking at the social economic factors that have impacted student achievement for all students, and certainly for Black students as well. He serves as the dean at the USC School of Education and graduate education. It is a pleasure to now introduce Dr. Pedro Noguera for his remarks.
Thank you, Superintendent. And it's such a pleasure to be with you and the others on this important task force. I want to thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank Senator Kamlager, who is also a Trojan, and I'm honored to serve with you on this in this important work. You know, there's a lot we know about the education of Black students. We know, for example, that although the population of Black students has declined significantly in the state, the problems and the experience have not diminished. Myself and Professor Howard, who you'll hear from a little later, co-authored a study on Black children in LA County, and very disturbed by the findings, which show reinforce these disparities in academic achievement. But what's important to note is that these are not simply educational issues. These go beyond the classroom and impact the quality of life, what's happening in the community. Black children face much higher rates of homelessness, more likely to be in foster care, more likely to suffer from asthma, more likely to be in neighborhoods where there are no grocery stores or parks. And so we need a concerted effort which looks holistically at these issues and doesn't try to approach this with the feeling that there's a quick fix solution to this complex problem. I do want to point out, though, that there's good news. The good news is there are schools in California that serve Black students well, and we should learn from those schools. Our report identified those schools. Some of them are right here in LA. We were trying to understand which schools, for example, send the greatest number of Black students to the University of California. All of those schools are integrated schools. But what we should know is Black students are more segregated than almost any group in the state. Latino students are also highly segregated. However, there's the Drew Magnet School, which is connected to Drew Medical School, the Drew MLK complex. That school sends more Black students to the University of California than any school in the state. What's special about this school? It offers enriched learning opportunities for students. It provides internships in the biomedical sciences. It provides high quality instruction in a supportive environment. That's what our students need. So we don't have to make this a mystery. We know what they need. The challenge is, how do we bring that kind of an education to more Black children throughout the state? The real problems are in the places where Black children are in the minority, where their parents' voices are not being heard, where they are too easily dismissed and too easily mistreated. And that's what we've also got to call attention to, the ways in which they're denied basic educational opportunities and justice. And so I look forward to working with the state superintendent. I think the time is right. It's been right for many years, and I'm eager to get started.
Thank you, Dr. Noguera, for lifting up the importance of that research that you and Dr. Howard provided. I think it provides truth-telling and also shows the way for how we can do this work. And I think pointing to those bright spots like Drew Magnet High School that we can look to and how we can learn from and replicate. And then when there are gaps that we need to fill to take us further, we can do that. We are grateful to you and excited to work closely with you in this work. Also want to acknowledge the next co-chair who's also worked on a number of bright spots and helped us to identify schools that are closing learning gaps, that are closing equity gaps, even before the pandemic for Black and brown kids. And that I think there will be great stories for us. And that is Ms. Desiree Carver Thomas, an incredible leader and researcher from the Learning Policy Institute, who's led important research that identifies bright spots for us. Ms. Desiree Carver Thomas is a renowned leader and researcher on equity, quality, and teacher diversity, and has worked closely with us on one of the initiatives that we sponsored legislation in the last session. How do we expand the pipeline of male educators of color who can work with our students? We appreciate that partnership, and it is a pleasure to turn the mic over to Ms. Desiree Carver Thomas to share some remarks.
Thank you, Superintendent Thurman. Yes, so my research focuses on issues of equity and educator quality, including student access to a stable, diverse, and high-quality teacher workforce. I'm also a former teacher. I taught in New York City public schools, and I understand how much great teachers who understand their students matters for student achievement. And that ability depends on how well teachers are prepared and supported in their schools, and also the diversity of the educator workforce, all of which support higher achievement for Black students in particular. As others have stated, Black student achievement comes down to a whole host of opportunities in and out of school. In terms of my research, we know that students of color and students from low-income families tend to have less access to fully credentialed and experienced teachers, a situation that's exacerbated by chronic teacher shortages. National data suggests that schools with more students of color have 4 times as many uncertified teachers compared to schools with few students of color. This is also true in California, where the schools that serve the most students of color, and especially those where Black students are concentrated, have in many cases had to hire most of their new teachers without training or experience. And this has serious implications for school stability and student achievement. Teachers without comprehensive preparation have turnover rates that are 2 to 3 times higher than those who enter well prepared. And data show that teacher turnover rates are much higher in schools serving more students of color. That's another factor that depresses student achievement, along with a lack of training and experience. So if we're going to improve Black student achievement, we're going to need to provide Black students with teachers who are well-trained, diverse, culturally competent, and well-supported to stay in the profession and in the schools where they're needed. Similar to Professor Noguera's description of bright spots, we conducted a study called California's Positive Outliers that demonstrated that teacher quality makes a difference for Black and Latino student achievement. The study identified California districts where Black and Latino students outperformed their peers across the state. These districts employed fewer teachers on substandard credentials and permits compared to the state average, and that was associated with significant increases in student performance, especially for Black and Latino students. These districts leverage local resources to build robust educator pipelines. They also retain teachers by creating favorable working conditions, a positive culture, and a climate of teacher support. So research like this offers some reassurance that California districts can support Black student achievement, and I'm eager to work with this task force to learn and share about how districts across the state can adopt and build upon promising practices to further nurture and support Black students. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Co-Chair Carver Thomas. We're so excited to continue reviewing the Positive Outliers research. It's been great to work with you since 2019, when we first started talking about that research and working with our groups that are focused on closing learning gaps. Thank you for that, and for really just calling it out that we're going to have to focus heavily on teacher preparation to make sure that we're supporting Black students. And so we're excited to work with you as the task force gets further underway. I'm also excited to welcome as a co-chair Dr. Tyrone Howard, who has worked closely with us on a number of webinars to prepare the field for supporting student achievement. He's no stranger to this work. Among other things, a professor of education at UCLA, associate dean of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and the director of the Black Male Institute on improving student achievement, and just an important partner who's just been so clear on the path that we must take to support Black student achievement. It's an honor to introduce the next co-chair, Dr. Tyrone Howard.
Thank you, Superintendent Thurman. I want to say how important this work is. Not only is it necessary, not only is it timely, but I think it's bottom line the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do because the data bears this out, and it's bared this out for a very long time. But I must say, what I'm also excited about is the fact that this esteemed group of individuals who will be taking this on recognize that this work is not for the faint of heart. There will be people who will criticize it. There will be people who say it's not necessary. There will be people who say that this is taken away from other students. I so appreciate what Senator Kamlager said when she says this is not a zero-sum game. Helping Black students does not take away from any other group of students in the state of California. But the bottom line is we have to get this right. Pedro talked about the fact that we know that the data are showing us that the number of Black youth across the state are decreasing. Nonetheless, there are close to 380,000 Black students in the state of California. That's a significant number. If the Black students in the state of California alone were its own district, it would be the third largest district in the nation, larger than Chicago, Philadelphia, and Houston. We're not talking about a handful of students here. The other thing we cannot sort of fall back on is that this is just a poverty issue, that if we just tackle poverty, these issues will be addressed. because we know that Black youth are disproportionately likely to be poor. But what we see, and the data bears this out, even Black kids in middle class and upper affluent neighborhoods still face the deep-seated kinds of racism that we know kids in low-income schools face. So what we cannot do is avoid race when we talk about this conversation. We cannot avoid structural racism because it's a part of what we know Black children have been facing for many years. I say this as someone who is a product of California public schools, as someone who taught in California public schools, and as someone who is able to have 4 children who came through California public schools. So this is personal for me because, as Pedro talked about, there are in-school factors that we have to address as it pertains to issues tied to are our children coming to school prepared to read? How do we end this craziness around suspending preschoolers, which Black youth are more likely to be suspended than any other group of young people at 3 and 4 years old? How do we ensure that we deal with discipline across the board, especially when we see that there's a high level of subjectivity when it comes to who's being suspended and who's being expelled? How do we begin to look at who gets access to AP and honors classes in the state of California, where Black students are severely underrepresented? How do we talk about structural concerns about who gets access to gifted and talented classes, where again, the data tells us district after district, Black youth are underrepresented in those opportunities. So I think we have to tackle those in-school factors as well, such as teacher preparation, teacher quality, teacher diversity. But at the same time, we cannot divorce this work from the importance of looking at those out-of-school factors. Dr. Noguera talked about the fact that we did in this report, looking at beyond the schoolhouse, that we can't expect schools to do it alone. What we also found in that report, in addition to those bright spots, is that there were important community-based organizations who played a vital role in helping to support Black youth. Los Angeles Community Coalition plays a vital role in providing support services to Black students. Social Justice Learning Institute does a great job in mentoring young Black men. We have to continue to lift up those examples as well across the state of California to find out how are schools partnering with community-based organizations, with nonprofits to help create the kind of robust support that we know Black youth need. So I'm excited about this work. I think it's about doing some real important lifting. This is historic, but it's not celebratory because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I maintain that as we look at these structural factors, as we look at these issues that have been entrenched in our schools for far too long, what we can't also run away from is the depths and breadths which we know anti-Blackness exists in our schools. That's not always easy for folks to hear, and it certainly is not easy for folks to talk about. But it has to be a part of how we begin to think about how do you begin to eradicate the depths of anti-Blackness that is oftentimes at the very root of why Black children are not seen as being capable learners. So I'm prepared to roll my sleeves up and get to work with this esteemed group of folks. Our children need us, they deserve us, and I think if now is not the time, I'm not sure when. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Each of you giving us a great sense of hope that now is the time. Thank you for your comments to really show that this is an area where we can make impact and scale with 380,000 Black students, and recognizing that we must address issues in and out of school and that we cannot avoid race, that this is an issue. There are issues here that cut across social economic factors and that we must, which tell us that we must address race. It speaks to one of the questions that already came to us in the chat. A question about how will we address issues around, Prop 209, and we've seen that in the legislature. We've been told that we cannot talk about race, and we believe that we have found a way to do so. And I want to thank the folks who've helped to create the Racial Equity Index that will allow us to talk about factors that affect Black students, but also other factors that go beyond free and reduced lunch, that recognize, factors that take place in the schools and in the communities that will give us the ability to talk about how we serve students in ways that allow us to not bump up against Prop 209. And I have to acknowledge, Dr. Howard mentioned some of the folks who helped to create this Racial Equity Index, the Community Coalition, the Brotherhood Crusade, the Advancement Project, and the Partnership for LA Schools, including Ryan Smith, who serves as one of our co-chairs on closing the opportunity gap. And so we have important work to do. Thank you to all the chairs who've spoken today. I do want to just acknowledge a few other chairs who could not be here today, but who are working closely with us. Dr. Kelly Lotto Hernandez, who runs the Ralph Bunche Center out of UCLA, who's been at the forefront, really, of addressing issues of race in society. And we are honored that Dr. Kelly Lotto Hernandez, who joins us as a task force co-chair, and Dr. Joseph Johnson, who is the founder and on faculty at the Center for Urban School Transformation, whose data has been helping us for many, many years have conversations about bright spots and positive outliers. We are excited to work with them. And then finally, some of the CDE staff who will be helping to lead this work along with our team. Dr. Daniel Lee, who leads our equity branch, our newly created equity branch. We've made this a priority, and Dr. Daniel Lee will be overseeing this work along with Blake Johnson from our Government Affairs Division and Pam Kadakia, who serves as our equity project manager. And so we just want to thank all the co-chairs for joining us and helping to frame where we are with this work, and turning it back to you, Maria, if we have questions that we can answer at this time.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent, and thank you to all of our guests today. Now I want to turn this over to our media partners, and thank you all for being with us. We have over 40 different participants today watching us and being a part of this. And so what I'm going to do is ask you to use the raised hand function if you do have a question, and we will call on you individually. At that point, I will turn on your mic. You will be asked to present your name and your media outlet and ask your question. When you've completed your question, I'll go ahead and mute you, and you'll be returned to the attendees section of the meeting. Just want to note for you, that means that there won't be an immediate follow-up opportunity for you. So if you do have a follow-up question, please go ahead and raise your hand again. We're going to do our best to get to as many questions as we can, and we'll get this started right now. So let me open this up now. We've had an individual with their hand up for a while. I'm going to open up the mic of Tony Ray Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Yes, this is Antonio Ray Harvey, also known as Tony Harvey. Good morning, Superintendent Thurman. I haven't seen you in a while, and I hope you're doing well as your family. You did speak at the top of this discussion. You touched on a certain issue: alienation, suspension, expulsion, absenteeism, racism. I think Senator Kamlager did mention that we're not looking for recommendations, but we should. Are you looking, what type of results are you looking for? Because this question has been posed to me by a parent, okay? We look at the student, the black and brown students issues, with suspensions and expulsion, but what are the results are you basically looking at? Because a parent asked me, they specifically said, if you look at the teachers who's behind the suspensions and the expulsions, you will get your answers. You will get your results. So what are the results are you looking for with this task force?
Thank you, Antonio, for your question. And let me just say right at the top that we are very interested in working closely with parent organizations all across the state. We know that parents have been raising their voices to sound the alarm of the treatment and sometimes mistreatment of Black students. And when we first saw this reach a crescendo when the pandemic began, and when we noted that 1 million students were without a computer or access to the internet, we heard from many of our equity partners, including EdTrust West, who told us that parents were saying, our kids are disconnected from school. They're not getting support. And in some cases, they were saying that Black students weren't getting the same levels of support that students from other groups were getting. By the way, they said Black students and English learners at that time. But this is just one example of where we have seen challenges. And it's why we've created a family engagement unit for the first time at the California Department of Education for us to help school districts find better ways to engage families, engage parents in this conversation. We will be building out this task force. Today, you're meeting some of the chairs. We will be building out the task force and creating spaces for parents and Black parent organizations to have the opportunity to work side by side with the members of the task force on how we address, and we hear their stories and look for solutions to address them. The task force will establish some metrics for how we will measure Black student achievement and improvement in that area. But we know that we'll have to look at the places where we have seen disproportionality. There's no reason for why someone who is in preschool is being expelled. That's pushing them right out into the criminal justice system. We will look at the impacts of race on the delivery of instruction in our schools. We've already been working on implicit bias training. We'll expand that again with our grant, $10 million to focus on anti-racism and anti-bias training for educators. We will continue to look at test scores, and we know where Black students are currently performing in literacy. All students in our state, when it comes to literacy, about 51% of our students are on grade level. But when you look specifically through the lens of Black students, that drops down to the 30s. And so there are many places where we can develop metrics against which to show progress and the timeline. Our task force will be articulating that work and helping us to figure out how we do that. How do we reduce chronic absenteeism and all the places where we see disproportionality for Black students? Thank you for that. And on to the next question, please.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm now going to call on Manny Otico.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. My question is that we've heard a lot about the external factors in children's students' achievement, but what role does parents have in making sure that children succeed in the school? I mean, and what is you as educators and researchers can you do to help parents improve their children's success in the school system?
You know, I'm going to share just a few thoughts, but then I want to invite our co-chairs if they wish to comment here to also do so. I think that the role of parent is critical as partner. Parents are our first educators of our children, and we have to honor the experience of our parents, but also support them. And our schools need to welcome parents, not view them as barriers or as an obstacle to what we do for our kids. Sometimes, and sadly, I don't think this is the case everywhere, but sometimes our schools are very difficult to navigate. And when parents are asking for things, it is sometimes difficult for parents of all backgrounds, but we want to particularly be attuned to the voices of Black parents. And I had the opportunity recently to speak with a number of parent organizing organizations in Los Angeles County who created their own blueprint for how to support Black student achievement that mirrors much of the research that you've heard talked about today. And so, as I mentioned, we will be building an opportunity for parents and Black parents to be a part of the work that we are doing here. And we look forward to working closely with them. Let me just see if Dr. Howard or Dr. Noguera wishes to add any more, or Senator Kamlager on the role of working with parents.
I'd be happy to speak to that. I think parents are a critical part of it. All the research shows that when parents are involved in a child's education, outcomes improve. What we have to look at is what factors either hinder or enhance the ability of parents to be involved. Parents have to be the child's advocate. Not all schools are comfortable with parents being advocates for their children, particularly when there are problems. So I do think the work of this task force has to examine what parents are doing when they are not able to be involved adequately, and what we can do to ensure that they have the same access as other parents to their schools and they're in a position to effectively advocate on the behalf of their children.
Let me also add to that, because I think that I agree, parents matter, parents make a difference. The research bears this out. But I think we have to be careful to not sort of shift this unweighted sort of responsibility on parents without recognizing some of the other structural conditions that make it difficult for parents to be involved. So we know that in the state of California, for example, there are lots of working class parents who are working multiple jobs and who are doing everything that they can to be able to support their young people. So that's why one of the things that I think we will have to explore are the utility of community schools. Up and down the state of California, there have been more community schools that are now being looked at to say, how do we make sure that there are wraparound supports at schools so that for those parents who work multiple jobs or who work late nights, they're not in a situation where their students are not being supported. So we have to look at what are the conditions when we look at parents who are working multiple jobs, can't find decent wages. still in pursuit of affordable housing, yet they still are doing everything in their power to try to be there for their young people. So again, sometimes we go down a rabbit hole of saying these people need to do more, they need to do more, but not look at some of the structural factors that are making it very difficult for them to participate in the way that schools expect them or want them to participate.
Thank you for that. Professors Noguera and Howard, I believe that there is a question for Senator Kamlager.
There is. Let me go ahead and open up the mic of Henrietta Burrows.
Yes, thank you so much. I have several questions. Please forgive my telephone for ringing. For Senator Kamlager, what did you say to your child's teacher when that comment was made, and what tips do you have for parents in similar situations? I also have a second question, and this one is for Superintendent Thurmond. How will the findings of the task force be implemented when they come in? And once the findings do come in, will they have to be approved by the legislature? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Senator Kamlager, if you are available, would you like to speak to the question about your interaction with the teacher and your children? I'd like to answer the question that was posed to me, and then if the senator is available, we will go back to the senator. I will just say that the findings will not need to be codified by the legislature, but the findings we will make public, the recommendations of the task force. And we believe that the recommendations of the task force will lead directly to legislation that can make a difference in moving student performance for Black students in the right direction. As you've heard today, we have noted researchers whose work points to where our challenges are and where our bright spots are. And it points to the path where we must go to be able to move forward. And so we know the direction that we must go. And we will go there and we will make those recommendations and we'll see where the legislation is going to go. And so we'll check to see if Senator Kamlager is available to speak to the issue of the interaction that you described. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. It would be great if we could just repeat the question, because unfortunately I was trying to do double duty on another call.
Maria, could you restate the question, please?
I can ask the question again. I was wondering, Senator Kamlager, what did you say to your child's teacher when that comment was made? And do you have any tips for parents who are in similar situations? How can they respond?
I think it's, so I try to err on the side of honesty all the time. And I know sometimes it gets me in trouble, but I had a really soulful discussion with my daughter to find out how that made her feel, what the response was from other students. And it was sobering that she's in a class where, like I said, there are only 2 African-American students in that particular class, and it really isolated them and made them incredibly uncomfortable. And so we actually moved into a conversation about what it means to be an ally and the importance of allyship, and not having to be, the only Black person who speaks up and says something, but how do you lean into and encourage your allies to step into that space for you. There was also a discussion with the particular educator, which I won't go into, but I think it's incredibly important for young people to know that adults in the space back them and support them and will stand up for them and will ask other adults to be accountable to the things that they have said. Ultimately, it's about this thing that we have been discussing this entire year, right? Ethnic studies, allyship, implicit bias. You know, biases are unconscious, they're automatic, they're oftentimes reinforced because they're replicated so often. We all have them. It doesn't mean that we're bad people. Sometimes the bias is the thing that helps us navigate through the world and compartmentalize how we navigate through it. And so it's not about shaming a particular person or even an educator, but helping them understand a better way to maybe talk about something really uncomfortable, like racial reckonings, racial injustices, your own place in this space as a non-Black person. And that educator just needed some additional help, and also needed to know that there was an adult in the room that was standing behind that particular child. It wasn't, it certainly was a distressing situation for all parties involved, but I do know that that won't be happening again.
I want to thank all of our guests and also all of our media who joined us today. We are now out of time. And so I'm going to just hand it back to the state superintendent for final remarks. Thank you again.
Maria, thank you. Thank you, Senator Kamlager, for that, what I would call a heart-to-heart conversation that sometimes we have to have directly with our children to teach them how to be advocates and how to hold their heads high and how to work through microaggressions and other challenges that get experienced. We know that there are many who do great work, who care for our kids, but we can't accept a single slight against any child of any background. And we know that race and racism have played a significant factor in impacting our kids. To that point, and as I noticed in the chat, there was a question about ethnic studies. We now have signed into law an ethnic studies graduation requirement. That means that our students will have the chance to learn about people of color and their contributions to this state. African-American students, Latino students, Asian American Pacific Islander students, and Native American students will be able to have provided to them examples of the contributions of their ancestors to make this a great state. But those contributions will be shared for all students. And again, as it is evidence-based that ethnic studies leads to higher graduation rates for our students, we believe that this will be a benefit for all of our students. And it will help to address some of the concerns that were also addressed in the chat about how independent study during the era of COVID has been difficult in many districts. The example was LA Unified, but it's been difficult across the state and across the nation because there are teacher shortages while our kids are quarantining from COVID. And so we will use many of these programs. We will use the dollars that we talked about for teacher recruitment to help us focus on how we close the teacher shortage and our staff shortages and our counselor shortages. And we'll acknowledge those schools that are in communities that have been impacted by fires and that have seen racism firsthand, and we'll provide support to them. We look forward to continuing to share the many resources that have now been developed at the California Department of Education to promote equity, to promote whole child supports and wraparound supports and transformative change in school culture. And so again, I'm grateful to all of our co-chairs for your thoughtful sharings and the incredible research. We expect to be making more announcements about the task force, its membership and its duration, and of course, the strategies that will be put in place for moving forward. Thank you in her absence, co-chair Desiree Carver-Thomas. Thank you, Chairperson Dr. Tyrone Howard. Thank you, Chairperson Dr. Pedro Noguera, and thank you, Senator Kamlager, for being an incredible partner and providing incredible, powerful testimony on this important work. Thank you to everyone at the California Department of Education, our communications team, for those who provided ASL translation, thank you. And to everyone, if you have follow-ups, please contact Blake Johnson at the California Department of Education. And if we can, let's please put that email in the chat for those who wish to follow. And if anyone in the media has additional questions, please contact Maria Clayton, and we're happy to answer your questions as we continue in this great work. Thank you for being on this journey with us, and we look forward to the work that we will do together. And for now, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.